It was Valentine's Day 2013 in the quiet city of Peoria, Illinois. A cold winter afternoon when love and celebration filled the air. For many couples, the day meant flowers, dinner, and moments of warmth shared behind closed doors. But inside one particular home on North Moss Avenue, something unthinkable was about to unfold. Something that would turn a day meant for love into one of betrayal, violence, and death. Denise Leuthold had spent the morning caring for her children, running errands, and preparing for what she thought would be a normal day. She was a mother of three, deeply religious, gentle by nature, and devoted to her family and faith. To everyone who knew her, Denise and her husband Nathan were a model couple. Missionaries who had spent years spreading their faith overseas, especially in Lithuania. They were known for their devotion to God, their love for their children, and their picture-perfect Christian marriage. But appearances can be deceiving. Behind the curtain of piety and smiles, something dark had been growing for years. Nathan, a man once respected for his discipline and calm demeanor, had begun to drift away emotionally. Those close to the couple had sensed it. The tension, the coldness, the subtle ways his affection for Denise had faded. Yet no one could imagine the true depth of the deception that would follow. That day, February 14th, started normally. The couple had their usual morning routine, but something about Nathan's behavior seemed off. He had made plans to meet friends later, but his words felt distant, rehearsed. Denise took their youngest child to school, not realizing she was living her final hours. At 3:15 p.m., a call was made to the Peoria Police Department. A neighbor had reported something strange. The Leuthold's door was open, and the alarm system was ringing. Officers arrived quickly. They entered the home cautiously, expecting a possible burglary. The house seemed disturbed, drawers pulled open, items scattered. But within moments, they found the scene no one ever forgets. In one of the bedrooms lay the lifeless body of Denise Leuthold. She had been shot once in the face, a single, precise bullet wound. Not random, not chaotic, but cold and calculated. The sight of her still body in a house that once echoed with family laughter broke even the most hardened officers. There were no signs of a struggle. Nothing made sense. At first, investigators thought it might have been a robbery gone wrong. The back door had been forced open and some valuables were missing. A camera, a few personal items. But something about the scene felt off. It was too clean, too controlled, almost as if it was arranged to look like a break-in. When Nathan arrived at the scene, his reaction drew immediate attention. He didn't rush to the officers. He didn't collapse in shock. His expression was strange, calm, detached. As detectives watched him, they noted every detail. His stillness, his tone, his focus on the logistics rather than grief. Something about his demeanor didn't fit the image of a husband who had just lost his wife in such a violent way. Within hours, the case shifted from a burglary investigation to a possible homicide, one that might have been personal. Detectives began digging deeper into Nathan and Denise's life together. They found years of missionary work, shared faith, and community respect. But they also found cracks, growing distance, financial strain, and whispers of something more troubling. Another woman. Her name was Ina Dobalite, a young Lithuanian woman Nathan and Denise had met during their mission trips overseas. To many, Ina was like a daughter to the family. Denise had welcomed her, treated her like one of their own. But what Denise didn't know was that Nathan's kindness toward Ina had crossed a line that would soon destroy everything. Detectives discovered messages, emails, and phone records showing constant contact between Nathan and Ina. Not just friendly, but intimate. It became clear that Nathan had been leading a double life, one built on lies wrapped in faith. The thought was chilling. A man who preached love and morality was possibly hiding the darkest sin of all, the murder of his own wife. As investigators traced Nathan's movements on Valentine's Day, the story began to twist in ways that felt almost cinematic. He claimed he had dropped off his kids, gone to the gym, and then run errands before coming home to find the horror. But surveillance footage told a different story. Cameras caught his car passing areas far from his claimed route, places near his home around the time of the shooting. Police also noticed something else. Nathan's behavior in the hours after the murder seemed rehearsed, as if he was performing for those around him. When detectives asked about the gun used in the crime, Nathan mentioned his .40 caliber Glock, registered in his name, which he claimed was missing, possibly stolen in the burglary. That claim would later become one of the biggest red flags in the entire investigation. The community was shaken. A missionary couple, known for their devotion, now at the center of a possible murder plot. People struggled to believe it. How could a man who spoke about faith, forgiveness, and family commit such an act? Yet every clue, every inconsistency began to point in one direction, toward Nathan himself. By the end of that first week, investigators had gathered enough evidence to doubt his story. The timeline didn't fit, his alibi had gaps, and his emotionless demeanor haunted everyone who saw him. But the motive, that was the missing piece. Why would a man kill the woman who built her life around him? It was Anna. Everything circled back to her. Nathan's obsession, his emotional dependence, and his secret dream of being with her openly. But in the world they lived in, bound by faith, community, and image, divorce was unacceptable. Nathan wanted freedom without losing face. To him, murder became the twisted answer. As the pieces started falling into place, detectives began to see the full picture. One of betrayal, manipulation, and deceit that went far beyond a single act of violence. They were about to uncover how deeply Nathan had planned every step, how methodically he had turned his wife's death into what he thought would be a perfect crime. But the truth, as it always does, would soon find its way out. Through digital traces, small mistakes, and a voice Nathan couldn't silence forever. The days following Denise Leuthold's death were heavy with confusion, disbelief, and quiet fear. The Leuthold family's friends, their church, and even the local community could barely accept the possibility that Nathan, the calm, soft-spoken missionary, might be involved. But investigators had stopped seeing him as a grieving husband. They now saw him as a man hiding behind religion, trying to outsmart everyone around him. Detectives began carefully reconstructing Nathan's day, moment by moment. Every phone call, every stop, every minute between dropping the kids off and finding Denise dead was mapped out in chilling precision. He had told police he left home around 11 a.m., ran errands, and returned later in the afternoon to find the house broken into. But the surveillance cameras around Peoria didn't lie. At 11:14 a.m., Nathan's black Toyota was caught driving near his home, the same time window when police believed Denise was killed. The timing was impossible to ignore. Investigators knew that whoever shot her had done so around 11:30 a.m. Yet Nathan's story placed him miles away. When confronted with the footage, Nathan seemed oddly calm, offering explanations that felt rehearsed, almost robotic. Then came another piece of evidence. A neighbor's security camera had captured a figure walking near the Leuthold home shortly before the shooting. Dressed in black, the person moved with caution, wearing gloves and a hood. The footage was grainy, but investigators believed it might be Nathan. The body language, the stride, even the height matched. While police continued gathering physical evidence, digital trails began revealing the truth. Investigators searched Nathan's computer and phone. What they found shattered the illusion of the faithful husband. The browser history was filled with disturbing searches. How to silence a gun, how to kill someone and get away with it, how to make a murder look like a burglary. The search dates, all within weeks before Denise's death. Even worse, investigators found that Nathan had been researching other crimes, studying how killers covered their tracks, what mistakes they made, and how police typically solve such cases. It was methodical, clinical, and terrifyingly detailed. By now, the name Ina Dobelaita was becoming central to the investigation. Nathan's relationship with her went far beyond mentorship. Emails, calls, and messages painted a picture of emotional dependence, of two people deeply entangled despite the age difference and moral boundaries. He had bought her gifts, paid her bills, and even arranged her return to the U.S. just weeks before the murder. Detectives interviewed Anna, who appeared nervous but cooperative. She insisted she had nothing to do with Denise's death, claiming Nathan was a father figure and spiritual mentor. But the tone of her messages told a different story. filled with affection, longing, and coded expressions of intimacy. There were messages where Nathan promised her a future, a new beginning, freedom. The picture was clear. Nathan wanted a life with Anna. Divorce would have destroyed his image, cost him his position in the church, and humiliated him in front of the community. Murder, in his mind, offered the only clean escape. As police analyzed the scene further, they realized the burglary was a stage. Drawers were opened, but valuables weren't taken. Items were scattered only where they'd be visible, and the back door, supposedly forced open, bore marks inconsistent with an actual break-in. It was an illusion, a performance designed for investigators. Then came the most damning discovery: ballistic evidence. The bullet that killed Denise was fired from a .40 caliber Glock, the same model Nathan owned. He had claimed it was missing, likely stolen by the burglar. But there was no sign of a real theft. When police searched his car, they found gun cleaning supplies and ammunition, matching the caliber used in the crime. The forensic evidence was tightening around him like a noose. Yet Nathan continued to play the part, speaking softly about his faith, about loss, about how much he loved Denise. To the public, he tried to maintain an image of innocence, even using scripture in interviews. But detectives could see through the performance. It wasn't grief, it was calculation. They examined his phone records next. Around the time of the murder, Nathan's phone had gone dark. No calls, no texts, no GPS data. He had turned it off deliberately, something he rarely did. Minutes after Denise's estimated time of death, the phone turned back on. To detectives, it was another sign of control. He had planned every move, every detail. The community began to split. Some defended Nathan, unable to believe a man of God could do something so vile. Others began to see the truth, that beneath his carefully built image lay a man driven by ego, obsession, and deceit. The police now had motive, opportunity, and physical evidence. But they needed one final piece: proof that he had premeditated Denise's murder. That came in the form of his computer files. Detectives found draft emails he had written to Ina, unsent but saved, where he spoke of freedom, of starting a new chapter, of the obstacles finally being gone. Each word felt like a confession wrapped in coded language. When police confronted Nathan with the evidence, he remained calm, his hands folded, his voice steady. He quoted scripture, said he was being tested, that God would deliver him, but his eyes, cold and focused, told another story. This wasn't a man broken by loss. It was a man cornered by truth. In March 2013, just weeks after the murder, police arrested Nathan Leuthold for the murder of his wife, Denise. The news spread like wildfire across Illinois and beyond. A missionary, a man who had preached faith and family, now accused of orchestrating a calculated execution of the woman who had stood beside him for 17 years. The image of Nathan being led in handcuffs stunned everyone who had known him. Cameras captured his blank stare, his refusal to answer reporters' questions, and his silent, almost defiant walk into the courthouse. The very people who once prayed with him now prayed for justice against him. Behind the scenes, prosecutors were preparing for one of the most emotionally charged trials Peoria had ever seen. They knew the evidence was strong, but they also knew Nathan's defense would play the religion card, portraying him as a misunderstood man of faith wrongly accused. As the months went by, the story spread across national media: the missionary murder, the Valentine's Day tragedy. Reporters from every corner of the country came to cover the story of a man whose mask of devotion had finally cracked. But even as Nathan sat in jail awaiting trial, he never confessed. He never showed remorse. He never shed a tear for Denise. Instead, he wrote letters, planned his defense, and clung to his image of innocence. The truth, however, was no longer in question. Every piece of evidence, every digital trace, every witness, they all spoke the same language, and soon the courtroom would echo with that truth, exposing the full extent of Nathan's manipulation and cruelty. The courtroom was silent when Nathan Leuthold entered, dressed in a dark suit, his Bible clutched tightly in one hand, as though faith could still shield him from truth. It had been months since Denise's murder, and the case had drawn nationwide attention. The image of a missionary, A man of God accused of killing his own wife on Valentine's Day had captured the public's imagination in the most haunting way possible. Family and friends filled the gallery seats. Denise's relatives sat together, holding hands, their faces drawn in pain and disbelief. On the other side sat Nathan's supporters, a smaller group that still struggled to reconcile the man they once admired with the monster the evidence described. When the judge entered, all rose. The trial had begun. The prosecution wasted no time. They painted a portrait of premeditation, of careful calculation, of a husband who valued his reputation more than the sanctity of his marriage. They told the jury how Nathan, weeks before the murder, had searched online for ways to make a killing look like a burglary, how he had studied other murders, and how he had silenced his phone during the time of the shooting. Every word built a picture of a man obsessed with control, with image, and with his secret love, Ina Dobalite. Prosecutors showed the jury the surveillance footage of Nathan's car circling near the house, the eerie image of the hooded figure walking toward his own home before Denise was killed. They showed the ballistic evidence, the missing Glock, the emails filled with longing for a new life. They spoke of Ina, the young woman who represented everything Nathan wanted: youth, freedom, excitement. In their narrative, Denise had become the obstacle he needed to remove. When Ina took the stand, the courtroom held its breath. Her voice trembled as she answered questions, her eyes darting toward Nathan only once. She insisted she had no part in Denise's death, but her tone was filled with guilt. She admitted Nathan had been deeply attached to her, that he spoke of leaving Denise, that he had expressed frustration and resentment toward his wife in recent months. It was the final confirmation of motive. The defense tried to counter the mountain of evidence by portraying Nathan as a man of faith, a missionary whose life had been dedicated to service, not violence. They claimed the searches on his computer were curiosity, that someone else could have staged the scene, that the police had tunnel vision from the start. They called him a victim of assumption, but no matter how carefully they crafted the words, the truth behind his eyes could not be hidden. Throughout the trial, Nathan sat expressionless. He listened to testimonies about Denise's kindness, her devotion to her children, her unwavering love for him even when he grew distant. He didn't cry when photos of her were shown, didn't react when the prosecution described the bullet wound that took her life. To the jury, he looked like a man already dead inside, a shell of the husband and father he once pretended to be. The most devastating moment came when Denise's daughter was brought to testify briefly about the day her mother died. Her innocence, her trembling voice, her confusion, it broke the room. Even the jurors lowered their eyes. In that moment, it wasn't just about law or evidence anymore. It was about a family destroyed by one man's selfishness. After weeks of testimony and cross-examinations, the jury left to deliberate. For hours, they reviewed the evidence, the emails, the gun, the search history, the lies. It didn't take long. When they returned, the courtroom stood still, the air thick with anticipation. The foreman's voice was calm, steady, final. We find the defendant, Nathan Leuthold, guilty of first-degree murder. There was no outburst, no gasp, only silence. Nathan didn't move. He didn't lower his head or cry out. He simply stared forward, unblinking, his face cold and lifeless. On the other side, Denise's family finally broke down. Tears, sobs, whispers of relief and pain, all blending into one moment of long-awaited justice. When the judge read the sentence, 80 years in prison, it was as though the weight of Denise's spirit finally settled in the room. The man who had once stood behind a pulpit preaching love and forgiveness would now spend the rest of his life behind bars, his words hollow, his faith a mask no longer hiding his sins. Reporters flooded outside the courthouse that day, calling it the Valentine's Day murder. The story of a missionary who turned his devotion into deception, a husband who chose lust over love, and faith as his disguise. The world saw the truth behind the smile that had fooled so many. In the years since, Nathan has remained in prison, showing little emotion, giving no public apology. His children, now older, live with the scars of what he took from them, not only their mother, but the illusion of what family once meant. Denise's memory, however, lives on in her community, in the people she touched with kindness, and in the justice that finally came for her. The story of Nathan Leuthold reminds us how evil often hides in the most unexpected places, behind charm, behind faith, behind words meant to inspire. It reminds us that sometimes the person you trust the most is the one who holds the darkest secret of all. And as the years pass, one truth remains unchanged, that justice may come slowly, but it always comes. If you believe Denise deserves to be remembered, hit like, share, and subscribe for more true crime stories